Hey, howdy, hello, and welcome to the show. Welcome back to another episode of the Steam Redlight series, where we purposely seek out both lowly and controversially rated games to see if they're really as bad as the internet says they are. I'm your host for the day, Smirk. Today's game we're looking at is Gleamlight, released on August 20th of 2020, and currently only has roughly 7 positive reviews out of 34 total. I happened to stumble upon this game this morning, and it's not every day where the new releases tab has a mostly negative game listed on it. Now, I never played Hollow Knight, but a lot of the reviews say this game is a Hollow Knight clone, or at least inspired by. The screenshots on the store page look great, and the music on the trailer all sound really nice, so I figured that the masses' gripes were in regards to the gameplay aspect, and at $20, I couldn't help myself from diving right in. So in Gleamlight, you play as an unnamed protagonist in a world that has the aesthetic equivalence of a stained glass chapel. Your character picks up the sword, and that's when the adventure begins. Hold the fuck up. I never noticed that when I was playing that this character is stabbing themselves with the sword. I really wish I had some sort of explanation what was going on. Deco, get the hell over here and explain what the hell's going on. And honestly, that's pretty much all you get. Which leads me to point out one of their points about this game on the store page. It lists an unspoken story. The game itself doesn't actually explain anything to you, and developers want you to figure it out for yourself. I've always been kind of torn on this stance because I've found that games can always convey a lot with just a little bit of dialogue, like Ori and the Blind Forest, for example. It sort of seems like a cop-out, so you don't have to worry about storyboarding or world building. When you look at the control list, you're given 6 inputs. 4 of them directional, 1 basic attack button, and 1 jump button. You find this out in the controller settings, because to another point, the developer says the game has no UI. And no UI means no communication from the developer, which includes giving you prompts to guide you through your first steps in the game. The gameplay is essentially that you go through the world and do the damage thing while jumping on some stuff. And that's all the basic stuff, so let's move on to the good and the not so good. The backing soundtrack in this game is easy to listen to. Now, I'm not saying I'd listen to it in my car, but it wasn't exactly an earsore when going through the game. The boss music is sort of motivating, but I wouldn't exactly call it groundbreaking. The backgrounds in this game look great, and the environment itself is really well made and could probably steal some wallpaper space on a person's desktop or two. I'm also pretty fond of some of the enemy designs. There's probably about a dozen or so unique designs throughout the world, and while most of them are gimmicky and once you learn how they work, they're no longer a problem, I thought their overall existence was nice, especially this dive-bombing dinglehopper. But I think that's about all the good things I have to say about this game. In regards to enemy designs, they do reuse a single boss 2 additional times after its first appearance, and I don't find that this boss has any change in their attack patterns, so that's kinda lame. In the gameplay aspect, HP for both you and your enemies are determined based on your depth of color. When you hit an enemy, you steal some of their life force, and the same happens to you. This leads to some really lackluster exchanges where you're simply trying to hit the enemy more frequently than they hit you, which leads to wet noodle fights like this.
I want to poop back and forth. Like, I'll poop into her butthole, and then she'll poop it back into my butthole.
There's also very little platforming difficulty. I'm not sure if this was intended, but there was one very specific part in the game where you had to pull off some wombo combo move with your abilities, and that was the only place that was really required. God. Are you kidding me? Lastly, there's a point in the game where you defeat what is kinda considered as the last boss, and the credits begin to roll. There's no indication that you should start again, and if I didn't read a review that talked about this specific aspect, the game would have been half as long for me, and even more lackluster. On top of this, I actually didn't know that I got new abilities, or when. I had to look at the keyboard menu because I unlocked the ability to super jump, but had no idea that it was C. I get the developers really hellbent on not having a UI and running a speechless story, but there are some occasions where I think that this can really disconnect your players. I would have never known that if I didn't look at the fucking controller menu. Oh, and also my game broke. I beat the final boss after going all the way back through the levels, and my character was bugged so that they couldn't die. This stopped me from actually finishing the game because, guess what? You have to die after defeating the last boss. Environment is great, music is nice, combat is kind of bland, the lack of UI and overall direction leads to some unnecessary disconnection. The story is pretty close to just being non-existent, because there's absolutely no written story or anything recognizable as character development in the game. The game also broke for me, so I actually can't complete it without starting over. It's also priced incredibly high at $20 for the value that the game brings. Hundreds, if not 1,000 games beat it out at this price point. Don't recommend. Well, that's it for the video. You can stop here. Sorry this video wasn't as comical as the last. The game didn't really give me much to work with. This is more of a case of the game actually just being in group's okayest effort, and I've given it more of an honest review than having much opportunity to poke fun at it. Feel free to like the video if you're just as sad as I am that I got to play 2 broken games in a row. Share this video with anybody who is a fan of Hollow Knight, maybe so they could relish in my pain. If you have a suggestion for a poorly rated game on Steam that I should review, feel free to post a comment below. Lastly, subscribe to the channel if you couldn't shirk the smirk, and maybe I'll see you next time.